You're both wrong. I'm talking here to the extreme sides on the South Africa-US tussle. On the one side, let's call it an extreme group within the Trump side, there are arguments that there's a genocide in South Africa. I think this is a very poor use of the word. I would reserve that word for the likes of the Rwanda genocide, the Holocaust. However, we don't need to classify something as genocide to acknowledge that it is an extreme human rights abuse. I'll come back to that. On the other side, an extreme faction within the Ramaphosa group, if you like, make the argument that there is nothing at all untoward happening in South Africa, and in particular, there is nothing outsized about the crime being committed on white farmers. I think that's implausible. I think we can acknowledge two things here. Many communities in South Africa suffer outsized, unacceptable crime, and often a distinct type of crime. I think one example is people who live in the Cape Flats, where that type of crime is gang violence. I think the administration has acknowledged that that is a particular and elevated type of crime situation, and that lets us at least attempt to respond. There's a refusal to acknowledge that white farmers are suffering a particular and elevated level of violence. I think if you look at data that Ernst Roots most compellingly presents, the conclusion to reach is that white South African farmers are suffering an elevated and particular type of violence. And I think that has a political and a racial element. And I think we should acknowledge that. So how do we approach this if we avoid extreme arguments that I think are not based on reality? I think we can go to some hard data and make some sensible conclusions. For example, we can go to the evidence of 140 plus racial laws in South Africa. 140 plus laws classify people in the country by race for different treatment. I think a sensible, cogent response to that is that we should stop. I can't think of a single society that has flourished long term by classifying people by race for different treatment. And that's currently what laws do, chiefly for economic purposes, what's called black economic empowerment. I would ignore the term because the reality is very different. My stance on this is that laws that divide us up by race don't help us. They may help a small group legitimately, and another small group illegitimately who take advantage of these laws. So I would suggest on this debate we ignore the unfounded extremes and we make more level-headed arguments based on reality and hard data. I don't think there's a genocide in South Africa. It's unwise to say there is. Equally, I don't think we can dismiss compelling evidence that various groups, including white farmers, are suffering human rights abuses that need to be addressed.